Persona was a series that I had never heard of up until December 7th of 2018. This is when they announced the first DLC fighter for Smash Ultimate, Joker from Persona 5 What Is That? Since Persona was recognized by Sack Daddy, I decided to look into 5 a little, and was immediately turned off by the anime art style.
Because anime games are for losers, and I am not a loser! I play very cool video games for very cool people. For example, Hello Neighbor!
As time went on, though, I heard more and more people talking about how good Persona 5 was, and the more I heard about the game, the more intrigued I was to play it. People also said that the game was sort of like Pokemon, and I like Pokemon. I like Pharaoh Seed. This game just might be for me! If they bring the game to the Switch, I'll pick it up then. They did just put Joker in Smash Bros. After all, so I don't think we're gonna have to wait too long for a Switch port. I was wrong. 3 years later, and Persona 5 was finally in my hands. Persona 5 Royal, specifically, an updated version of P5 with quality of life improvements and more story content. And in those 3 years, I've changed. I've grown from a 14-year-old idiot to a 17-year-old idiot that is also a weeb. That anime art style isn't really bugging me anymore.
That's a nipple.
Enough foreplay. Let's see what all the hubbub is about.
This story is a work of fiction. Similarities between characters or events to persons living or dead in your world are purely coincidental. Only those who have agreed to the above have the privilege of partaking in this game.
No!
I see. Then unfortunately, I cannot allow you to partake of this game. I must ask that you leave.
Well, that was rude.
Persona 5 sees you playing as a high school student who's falsely accused of assaulting a man. For the next year, you're on probation, living in the backstreets of Tokyo with your guardian Sojiro Sakura, and just like in real life, people don't like you. Everyone is talking behind your back, people spread rumors about you, it really makes you feel like you don't belong here. Don't you worry though, you start making more friends after you and a kid named Ryuji end up in an alternate reality on your way to school. You two meet a cat named Morgana, and he explains how this place works, and I'm gonna try my best to explain it because it's really damn complicated. This is the metaverse, an alternate reality formed by someone's distorted desires. In the metaverse are these places called palaces. This one in particular belongs to Kamoshida, your school's abusive volleyball coach. He's also a pervert.
Hey now, being a model's fine and dandy, but don't work your pretty little self to the bone.
In the real world, Kamoshida views himself as some sort of king, and he sees the high school as his castle. Thus, in the metaverse, the school is a literal castle, and his slaves are the volleyball students that he abuses. Kamoshida isn't the only one to have a palace, though. Multiple people in the game have one of their very own. The only way to get rid of a palace is to change the owner's heart, and that's your main goal here. And that is a brief summary on how the metaverse works. If you're still confused, go to Wikipedia. Luckily, Morgana helps you to escape, and you and Ryuji make it back to the real world. But you two can't live with what you saw in there, though, and decide to do something about it. So you guys form a group called the Phantom Thieves to take down Kamoshida along with all the other crummy adults of Tokyo and reform society. With each new target, a new member joins the team. We already talked about Ryuji, an X-Track team member, Morgana, a horny cat, An, a spunky model, Yosuke, Makoto, a badass student council president. She's also best girl. Futaba, a geeky shut-in. And Haru, a rich girl with really, really bad daddy issues. The characters are easily one of the best parts of P5. They all have really good chemistry, and I never got tired of watching them bicker back and forth or hearing all their dialogue while going through Mementos. They're all super fleshed out, too, and really well developed. I found myself caring for each member of the team. I love all of these guys, not you. Persona 5 is a calendar RPG. What that means is you have a set amount of time to change someone's heart. If you don't do so before time runs out, then it's game over. This game is all about time management, and how you choose to spend that time is crucial. You can either go to the metaverse and explore the palaces of each target, or you can spend time with your friends in the real world. From here, the gameplay is split in two halves. First off is the dungeon crawling, where you venture through each palace and fight monsters called shadows. Each palace feels very Zelda-like in their design. They all have multiple floors, there's chests everywhere, there's some light puzzle solving, and they all end with a boss fight, most of which are pretty good, with the exception of Okumura. Okumura's boss fight is very dumb, and it made me upset. Each palace has a certain theme, too. Madarame is a world-renowned artist who plagiarizes the work of his pupils, so his palace is an art museum. Then there's Kaneshiro, a mafia boss, and his is a bank. And then there's Okumura, a CEO of a fast food restaurant chain, Big Bang Burger, and his is themed after a space station. I really like all the palaces, not Okumura's. Okumura's palace as a whole kind of sucks, but for the most part, they're all pretty solid. They're really well designed, and they're fun to go through. And as you go through each palace, you're sure to run into some shadows, and when that happens, you'll trigger a battle. Persona 5's battles are kind of like Pokemon's, but unlike Pokemon, P5 actually has a fun and innovative battle system. You have an assortment of commands. You've got your standard melee attack, you can guard, use an item, you have a gun, but then you've got your persona, and this is what you'll be primarily using in battle. Each persona has different attack types: fire, wind, electricity, you know the drill. And each shadow is weak to certain types of attacks. If you use a fire attack on one that's weak to fire, you'll knock that guy down. Once that happens, you can do one of two things. You can either get another turn in and attack him again, or you can use something called a baton pass. If he hit an enemy's weakness, you can pass the baton onto another one of your party members, and then they can get an extra attack in, and that attack will also do more damage. And if they hit another enemy's weakness, they can pass the baton onto another party member, wash, rinse, repeat. One might argue that this isn't too different from Pokemon and that it might get old after a while, but I don't fucking care. I've been playing Pokemon for over a decade now, and while I do really like that battle system, outside of things like the Agile and Strong style and Legends Arceus, it hasn't really changed that much. Persona 5's battles feel refreshing, and using a baton pass is endlessly satisfying. It never got old. And the comparisons with Pokemon don't stop there, because much like how you can catch more Pokemon, you can also collect more personas. Unlike Pokemon, you can crossbreed them. If you head on down to the Velvet Room, Igor here will let you fuse the personas you find while trekking through the palaces. Fusing two of your personas together can create an even stronger persona. This mechanic is very fun and very useful, and you should use it whenever you can. For the love of God, do not be like me on my first playthrough and not fuse your personas. I love this mechanic. It really makes you want to collect each and every one you see. Even if you find a weak persona, you can always fuse it with another to make a pretty powerful one. You can also fuse two together to make a weaker one, but why would you do that? You can't stay in the metaverse forever though. If your persona runs out of stamina, then there's not really much you can do down there. So when that happens, you can always go back to the real world, and that brings us to the second half of Persona 5's gameplay loop. Whenever you aren't dicking around in the metaverse, there's always stuff to do in the real world. And sometimes that stuff can affect what you do in the metaverse. If you buy medicine from Takemi in the real world, you can use that medicine in the metaverse. And if you buy a model gun in the real world, you can also use that gun in the metaverse. And then there's the social stats. You can level up your knowledge, guts, charm, kindness, and proficiency by doing all sorts of different things. If you answer a question correctly in school, you gain a point in knowledge. If you wash the floor at Sojiro's cafe, you gain a point in kindness. As far as I know, raising them doesn't affect what you do in the metaverse at all, but they are crucial in the real world. You can also spend time with certain people, or as the game calls them, confidants. Some of your confidants include your party members, but you can also hang out with other people like Sojiro or the resident Dr. Takemi or your teacher Kawakami. Each confidant has 10 ranks. The more time you spend with each one, the more you can rank that confidant up. These guys are really useful. Ranking them up can net you specific abilities in the metaverse. If you rank up Ant's confidant, you'll unlock her sexy technique, which prevents enemies from attacking you, or if you rank up Makoto, she'll be able to see an enemy's weakness. Yeah, hi, I was wrong about that. Makoto can't see an enemy's weakness. Instead, she has something called shadow factorization, which lets you see an enemy's null, drain, and repel. So yeah, that's all. I'm sorry. Even the confidants that aren't in your party can help you out too. Sojiro, for example, can teach you how to make coffee, which restores your stamina. And at first, Takemi's selection of medicine is pretty limited, but if you rank up her confidant, you'll unlock more useful medicine. You can also learn a lot more about each character through their confidant. Each one has their own little story and character arc. This makes each character feel really three-dimensional and fleshed out. Even if their confidant isn't that useful, you'll still want to see what happens when you rank them up. One other fun thing about the confidants is that you can romance all of the women. I went with Makoto, but you have a variety of females to choose from, ranging from shy gamer girl to sad middle-aged alcoholic. Some confidants require you to have your social stats at a certain level though. That's why I said it was important for you to rank them up earlier. For example, you have to have your guts at Dauntless to unlock EY's confidant, so it's important that you balance what you do in the real world between spending time with people and raising your social stats. Persona 5 manages to do the unthinkable and makes doing mundane shit feel fun. Everything I do feels like it's important and that it'll benefit me both in the real world and in the metaverse. I also love learning more about and connecting with each character through their confidant. All the stuff you do in the real world feels just as, if not more fun than the stuff you do in the metaverse. You're given like 20 days to change the heart of each target, and you have to choose what you do in those 20 days. You can either dedicate a day to go into the metaverse, or you could spend the whole day ranking up your confidants and social stats. You're given more than enough time to complete each palace, so don't worry about not being able to beat one before the deadline. Hell, I usually just blast through one in one day and then dedicate the rest of the days to the real world. This isn't how you're supposed to do it. You're supposed to do like a little chunk of the palace each time you go and then spend the next day or two in the real world, but I like to just get the palace over with as soon as possible. The problem with completing a palace in a day is that it can get kind of boring staying in the real world for like 18 days waiting for the change of heart. That's where Mementos comes into play, which is sort of a not quite endless but very long dungeon. While there, you can take down smaller criminals that aren't quite as despicable as the palace rulers, but still pretty bad. Mementos is a series of randomly generated floors with shadows and treasure chests scattered around each one. The dungeon design is nowhere near as good as any of the other palaces, but if you're waiting for the change of heart and you're bored of being in the real world, it's pretty good to go after some targets every now and then. It also serves as a nice way to do some grinding, so that's always helpful. I also want to touch on P5's visuals, because this is probably easily one of the most stylish games I've ever played. Looking at Persona 4's UI, it does the job, but it doesn't really have much going for it other than that it has a really cool shade of yellow. Persona 5 laughs in the face of this and has a UI and multiple menus that you could get off to. Everything about these oozes charm. The contrasting colors of the menus make everything so lively and full of character. They make stuff like deciding what to do in battle or buying items way more fun than they need to be. Even the dialogue boxes, they could have just made them regular rectangles, but no! They went and made one of the sexiest quadrilaterals in gaming. One of. Okay, I've been holding off on this for a while now, but I think it's finally time that we talk about the music. It is just silly how many good tracks are in this game. Much of Persona 5's music is something called acid jazz, which is basically if traditional jazz, funk, hip-hop, and EDM got together for one big foursome, the result of which makes my ears very happy. There's a ton of catchy tracks in P5, including but not limited to Takeover, Phantom, Life Will Change, Life Goes On, Willpower, Sweet, The Victory Theme, Blooming Villain, Beneath the Mask, The Mementos Theme,
Wake Up,
Price,
Get Out
A
There,
Woman,
Butterfly
Alley
Kiss,
Cat,
Power Fading,
Put On My Blind
Side,
Side,
Desert,
It's just banger after banger, and each song feels so distinct, and they give the game this kind of spunk that other games tend to lack. Alright, now that I've done my good share of ass-kissing for this game, I do think it's time we go over some of its flaws. Starting with the story. Now, I'd actually say that P5 actually has a pretty solid narrative, but at times it can feel less like a story and more like a collection of character arcs. They're really good character arcs, but I just wish they put a bit more focus into the actual narrative. A lot of the narrative feels like find the next target, beat the target, find the next target, beat the target. The characters don't really have much of an overarching goal. I guess you could argue that reforming society is their main objective, but when you defeat each target, it doesn't really feel like it makes much of an impact on the greater story. And something like Persona 4, that game is focused on stopping a murderer, and when you beat each dungeon in the game, it brings you closer and closer to figuring out who the murderer is. When you change someone's heart in Persona 5, the game is like, good thing that guy's in jail, who's next? It takes a while for things to really get interesting. This is just me though, plenty of people adore the story, and if you disagree with my dumbass, feel free to say so in the comments. I'm not even saying it's bad or anything, I just wish it was a tiny bit better. Even if the story isn't quite perfect, I do think it's worth seeing through to the very end. If you're unemployed. Yeah, now it's time to talk about my one big flaw with the game. Persona 5 is very, very long. My first playthrough took around 106 hours to beat. Jesus. I was invested while playing through the first time and had no problem with the long playtime, but there are some issues with the game's pacing. I'd say that the main one is that there's a bunch of moments that feel like they're stretched out longer than they need to be. The tutorial, for example, is like 6 fucking hours. And that could just be because it has to introduce you to a bunch of different things. The metaverse, the characters, the personas, the combat, the Velvet Room. That does make it a little more understandable to have a longer tutorial. But when you look at Persona 4, that game's tutorial introduces a lot of stuff similar to 5's, and it does what took 5 about 6 hours to do in like 3 hours. I'd say that you could shave like a solid 20 hours off of the game. A bunch of moments feel like they were dragged out to extend the playtime, and I didn't mind that much in my first playthrough, but there were times where I just wanted the game to hurry it up a little bit. There is a fast forward button that speeds through scenes. I never used it on my first playthrough because I was worried that if I did, I'd miss some important story beats, but when I play now, it's my best friend and I use it constantly. Also, that long playtime is gonna scare away some players. A lot of people aren't into JRPGs, and a lot more people don't feel like putting hours and hours and hours into a game. If you're looking to play Persona 5, just know that it takes a while for things to really get going, and also like 50% of the game is dialogue. If that's not your thing, don't even look at it. Even if Persona 5 is a little too long, that doesn't take away from the fact that this is an excellent game. It's got everything I'd want out of a modern RPG. The characters are fun and well written, it's got a killer soundtrack, the story is pretty good, the visuals are stylish and spunky, the turn-based battles are so fun and satisfying, you don't have to grind that much, and you can bang your teacher. Take notes, Pokemon.